Hey guys, Todd Sachs of Sachs Realty, and I have a really special podcast for you this evening. Um, we want this video to go around the world. In fact, we've already started because our guest and author is from Australia, and he's in Australia right now. And guys, it's 10 a.m. in Australia. It's 8 p.m. here in Eastern time, and I'm going to introduce Toph Evans. Toph wrote a book called Everyone Has a Plan Until Shit Hits the Fan. And guys, my mom used to say that when I was little. And, I mean, a lot of you have heard, what happens when the shit's getting ready to hit the fan. And I can tell you, the shit has hit the fan. I mean, with everything that's going on, I mean, here we are, we're bringing in 2020, January 1, and we're like, yeah, the roaring 20s. And then all of a sudden, March hits. We have a global pandemic, and everybody's going, the shit's hitting the fan. And you may be a college kid that was graduating and you had to graduate via Zoom, or maybe you didn't have a graduation. Maybe you're getting married and you had plans, people coming in from out of town, and you had to cancel them, whatever it is. Maybe you were starting a new job. So I want to thank you, To, for your time and joining us. And man, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yeah, pleasure for having me. Thank you, mate. So for myself, I'm just any other human being, but for myself, everything I've done has come out of adversity. As someone who has put himself through some extreme endurance events and being an advocate on mental health, it all happened because of adversity. And you did mention the book, and I'm not here to plug it, but the title of it is it's just ironic. I wrote it 3 years ago, but it's still applicable with today's times. Like if everyone was asked in 2015, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? No one would have got it right. And it's true. Like, what we have to know is how to adapt. And for myself, and don't get me wrong, I still struggle with anxiety today. Maybe not as much as the depression, but even back, and I'm just here to be vulnerable as well, here to be open as just a regular human being.
Awesome.
I used to struggle with certain insecurities in my life that made me mask myself as someone else. So when I look in the mirror, I didn't want to be that person I was looking at. So I wanted to be someone else. And that backfired, and that bit me on the ass pretty hard, where I went through this deep spiral of a wormhole that I was fortunate enough to come across like the right people with mentorship, and just started to have an open mind and started to look after my body as well. So I went through, like, to backtrack it a bit, like I went down the drug and alcohol path pretty badly, and I was using it to mask. And it was an amplification of like exactly what I was thinking in my mood. And one thing led to another and to another. And it did seem like suicide was the only purpose that I had at the time. It was pretty bad. And when I was mad, like it felt like a push and pull with my anxiety and depression, with this tug of war. It wasn't until I was able to open up and properly process what was going on that unworthiness was like a keen candidate of what was going on, that and powerlessness. Some people have trouble with abandonment, but a lot of it was like traumas as a kid, trying to validate who I was, people pleasing. And it wasn't until I said, I need to focus on myself. And focusing on myself meant reading. Like, that was actually like a big one for me. I had never read a full book from start to finish. And it wasn't until I got keen on people's biographies and see like a lot of them came from nothing and turned into something. And the something was that they created themselves. It wasn't something predicated on anyone else. Then I got into health, and I was a kid, to put it in perspective. In high school, I never did sports because I was ashamed of who I was. I I had the worst hand-eye coordination back then. I think things have picked up a little bit better. I never did sports, and I just thought I'd stay as an academic kid because of what I perceived as what it meant to be an athlete. And then I managed to use sport as an outlet for me, ironically, growing up as I left school. So I used walking and running, and then running turned into marathons, and then marathons turned into these stupid long distance events that I'd never thought I could imagine do. But then once I was able to have that feeling of, oh, wow, I've got my worth back. I was able to use that to give back as well. So that gratitude piece from a massive, like the utmost level of giving back, really kind of solidified a purpose in a way. So I was doing all these events, giving back to a cause that meant a lot to me. And then things started to really unfold when I really opened up about the mental health side of things, because I never really spoke about it. And then I thought now is the best time, because I want to break down of what masculinity means, because it is okay to cry as a guy. It is okay to go through sadness and anger, and as well as joy and fear, but to be able to process that. So to actually talk about who I am as a person is just like everyone else. Mental health advocacy just seemed like the great outlet for me to actually speak about these things and talk about resilience, that we're all human and we can go through these things, but what makes greatness is actually bouncing back from that. So yeah, there's a little synopsis in a real setting.
That's really great. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable, because there are a lot of people that feel exactly the way that you do. And it's hard. They're probably stuck and not know. And especially with the COVID and the state of our world right now, it would be hard for them to maybe get out of that and move in the proper direction. You talked about the endurance challenges. Was that just something that you were like, how did that happen? How were you like, I'm going to start and do this and it's going to help me? Can you walk us down that a little bit?
Yeah, and really, and to piggyback on that, I mean, you're a young guy. I mean, it's so, I mean, there are a lot of young people right now. I mean, I know they're graduating college. I mean, a lot of 22, 23-year-olds or people graduating with their master's degree, and they're moving back home, and they're feeling, maybe they're feeling like, there isn't a whole lot of hope. They were hoping to have jobs, and maybe some of them were getting jobs. I mean, when did you start, just to kind of, piggyback on what Melissa's saying with getting into endurance? I mean, how did you turn, how young were you when you started turning to things that were more destructive, like drugs and alcohol and things like that? And when did you start to acknowledge that you were actually having mental health issues? And then, how did you pull yourself out to that and then use that, or, morph into this athlete that you never were when you were younger?
I guess going back to Melissa's question, it was, and I'll obviously go into you, Todd. I managed to get this on board with a friend. So he was noticing like how much impact I was having myself, that he wanted to jump on board. And then after a few events, we decided, why don't we actually do this together? And being immersed in such a community, people would see us do all these events. So the first year, 2016, we did 40 events one year. So to put that in perspective, that's like doing that's doing like almost one every week. And people would see us at these events and going, you guys should do this, you guys should do that. And then we thought, screw it, why not? And if we're going to be putting our bodies through hell, it's like, what's the worst that can happen if we put ourselves through twice the distances and all that? So for us, something beautiful came out of from a challenge, and we flipped the script. Well, I flipped the script in my thoughts. I'm going, I wasn't able to do this, to going, I've been through something similar. What's the worst that can happen to go through that? So that's just to answer your question, Melissa. Mm-hmm. Regarding you, Todd, it was more having the understanding of the issues. I would say, and like I would feel that knowing that it was okay to not be okay. I'm going, okay, I feel pretty bad. I don't feel that great right now. And when I had surrendered to what was going on, there was an acceptance that finally came with it. That acceptance came about because I've just understood that, okay, this is where I'm at, and understanding where I'm at. And I still surrender to things if I've got like a resistance with whatever I'm going in. It could be anything to do with work or any other pillar in life that I'm going through. When I finally like surrendered that, I've accepted to where I'm at, I'm able to move forward and it makes like an anchor point of where I'm at. And it's almost like you can kind of gamify, like I can kind of gamify it by going, okay, now let's see if I can get out of this. And if not, then I can still ask for help anyway. And that's one of the hardest things. And it's pretty hard. Like there is like a lot of like stigma attached to it for asking for help, because as a guy,
how old were you?
Like
when you
how old was I? I'd say 21, 22 when this was at this point. Because as a guy, it's almost like brought up that we have to know how to take care and how to take care of everything and everyone. But I was doing that, but I was taking care of myself. So it's like, look, I might need a hand with this, and this is going to be a rocky process. But just accepting where I'm at makes me accept me for who I am. And it is more of a self-validation thing as opposed to relying on external resources.
Are you religious?
No, I'm not. That's the thing. So I was baptized Catholic because I have a Filipino mom, and it's very common to do that. But I don't. I still think I think I'm agnostic, where I think there is something out there, and whether that's the universe or whatever, some people call it God, whatever the situation is. I definitely think there's an energy out there. But I think that happens from the good that I put in. So almost like a karma, but it's also for good intention.
Mm-hmm.
Law of the land.
Yeah, exactly. We've watched a lot of your videos, and you talk about the formula of adversity times mindset times gratitude. Can you explain that a little bit for everyone who's listening?
Yeah, sure. So I'm studying this thing with like neuroscientists and with psychologists, and even for myself, of like breaking down of like, how did I, for myself and other people as case studies, how did they get out of it? And like the common things that we'd found that were, it's like this Venn diagram, to put it in perspective. No one's seen this. And the first circle is adversity, the second one's mindset, and then the last one's gratitude. But there's always these converging things. When the circles overlap, there's this middle piece. And when I say the start is adversity, it comes back full circle. It always goes around. And like when you go through it, we all have gone through it. It goes back again, but at least it gives us an awareness, and it teaches us that if we're going through adversity, there will always be some sort of gratitude and perspective at the end. To put it in perspective, no pun intended, that it's thinking of it like the adversity comes in, and it's usually some sort of hardship. It could be losing a loved one. It could be losing a job. It could be an injury. It could be anything. And then once there's like that acceptance process, it does change the mindset. And it's about like, all right, what are the small actionable steps about moving forward? Who do I need to reach out to? Who's going to be in my circle to help me go through this? And then in there, once the ball is starting to roll, then obsession comes through. And I'm not talking addiction, obsession, like utmost full energy in there to get through it. And then throughout the process, because it is about the process, not the destination, there is like a light bulb moment or a click or just some sort of point where, for myself, I will go, and anyone else that would recognize this can go, oh my God, I'm actually grateful to go through the hell at the start, because I would not be here without it. And that gratitude leads into perspective. And I think perspective is so important, because that's what compassion and empathy comes from. Like right now, we're going through a pandemic. We're also going through anti-racism. We're going through everything. And let's go back to the COVID thing, because I touched on that first. We can all relate to it because we're all going through it as a species, not as a nation, as a species. Like it's only now that our restrictions are starting to ease off here in our state now, in Australia as well. But we can all go, damn, I can relate to that because I'm going through that right now. And we all might be going through it differently, but at least we can have empathy and some sort of perspective on how we're going through it. And I think that's what it's teaching us about the Black Lives Matter movement, and with anti-racism, that like I know what it's like to be bullied because of my color. Like I was an outcast. Like I was born in New Zealand and I moved to Australia, but they're like sister countries. But I have an Asian background, so I know what it's like to be an outcast. But I just also am glad like this movement's coming out, because it's teaching how like white privilege is what it's about for me to understand what it's about, and also vice versa. So that comes from it. That's a perfect way to look around how the practical resilience, that framework, has applied to even today's and the relevant movements of what's going on right now.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Melissa.
No, I was just going to say thank you so much for touching on that. And I really wanted to get into switch it up just a little bit and talk about your endurance challenges. So what was the one that took the most time for you? I know I think 24 hours on the treadmill was
this
what
is
I
some
saw.
crazy stuff.
Really, well, of the challenges that you have done. Can you share with us some of the challenges that you have?
Yeah. Like the 24 hours on the treadmill, I pretty much orchestrated the whole thing. It was never an event. I had to do business development to get the sponsors on board. I had to get the treadmills from other states, as well as managing it, running it, literally. Like things like that. I'm on this treadmill for 12 hours and going, this is easier than managing the process of getting all the stuff here.
Wow.
But so, like that was hard, like 18 hours, body's cramping, hard to go to the toilet. What else have we done? Some like obscure, like, yes, there's the marathons and the 100-mile events and things like that. But there's also like the weird obscure ones, like carrying 50, I'm going to put this in American terms because I did do the conversions, 55 pounds of water on the shoulders for 62 miles or 100 kilometers. So looking like what people look like in developing countries with like the stick and the gallons of water, doing that for a charity. Well, I was so inspired by the story that I was like, okay, we got to do this. That I realized we're carrying like 5 times the amount of water they would on their shoulders, but still understanding to put it in perspective in the most obscene way did really make me empathize and be very compassionate of what people that are going through stuff like that can't get any basic water. Like I can just get water from my tap and it's drinkable.
Amen.
So events like that, I'd say the one that hit me the hardest, and actually I went through a mental breakdown and identity crisis afterwards, was attempting to run across Scotland. So 214 mile, which is 345 kilometers. I wanted to do this for 2 reasons, a selfish reason and a selfless reason. So this was in 2018, August, September time. I wanted to do it selfishly because of how I was able to turn myself around. And I wanted to put myself through, this would have been my hardest event. This would have been more than double the distance I would have ran before. So 100 and something mile was the furthest I ran before. Now I'm trying to do 214. And it's a lot. Like people don't even drive that far.
Yeah, it's a long way.
And it's through Scotland. I'm going through cow paddocks and like everything. And the selfless reason was for everyone that was told that they were told no throughout their entire lives, because as we get older, and I'm sure it's done out of love, but people are like, you can't do this because of that. And they're projecting their own insecurities and their own rejections onto other people. So that anyone that's wanted to ask that girl or the guy out on a date, or wanted to write that book, or to start that business, could be anything, and is held back by the saying no. This was for them to show that using perspective, not comparison, using perspective of how a human being, any other human being, like goes through the same feelings as everyone else, is able to run from one side of the country to another, then this might give them a bit of like, just shed some light on the topic. But that was so hard because there's a video of me breaking down, like crying my ass off, because I'm just in a mess. Like I'm 180 miles in, 174 miles in, and I'm pulling out and it's messed up. But afterwards I was going through identity crisis of, should I be a runner, to I wasn't able to finish it, all these things. That it makes me so grateful that I didn't finish it, because it taught me so much about myself. Like Kobe says, like we learn more about the losses than the wins, but it taught me about community, which is partly what reason a human has a purpose, is we're neurobiologically wired for storing, for connection. Brene Brown says it. I've actually mentioned it in the book so many times. And when I didn't finish those 40 miles, people around the LinkedIn community, just people around the world that had been following the journey, were contributing to a few miles that they were able to help. Like, gives me goosebumps. That I sent it to the race director. I was like, I don't care about the finisher buckle because you get a buckle when you finish. I know, right? We do this for a piece of metal. Yeah, and they're like, well, I'd rather this than that, and they're like, respect, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
That one taught me so much about myself.
That it's okay. It's okay to not, accomplish.
It was a better story anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and I say this all the time. I mean, you're going to win some and you're going to lose some. The idea is, if you're going to lose, I mean, you look at two sports teams going against each other, they both can't win. So, I mean, in most sports, I mean, you have a winner and you have a loser, and it's okay to lose, but you showed up. You showed up to win, and, and you learn something by it, and you can strengthen by that. I mean, this is amazing stuff. I mean, when I looked at some of the things that you were doing, some of these physical challenges, I was just, I mean, I've been an athlete, pretty much my whole life. And
if you don't mind me asking, what sports were you involved with?
I played football, I played lacrosse, I ran, and just, in rec council as a kid, and then in high school, and not, in college. But I know the kind of commitment and the physical commitment and how you have to build up the things. And I mean, so when you said you didn't want to plug your book, well, I want to plug your book because I think, so far, I mean, your book is great. And, for everybody listening, I mean, look, he's got great reviews on Amazon. Check it out. Certainly, I think it applies to just about everything. And, give us some advice for, people right now that are going through, mental health issues or just struggles of identity and things that you're touching on. Yeah. Can you just give the audience just a couple good things that they can be doing to just get through the next step and kind of, take us through a little process?
Sure. And I think this is going to piggyback. I think this is a great time to segue actually into what you're talking about, winning and losing. And this actually applies to something practical. So if anyone has a Netflix doco, I feel free to watch Brene Brown's doco that she put out last. It wasn't a doco, it was actually a keynote that they recorded. And she talks about winning. And winning actually might look like, for ourselves, it could be just showing up. That could be a win. It's like daring greatly for that. It's getting outside and going for a walk just to clear our heads. So it's changing the perspective of what winning is to ourselves. It doesn't mean doing the complete thing. It's actually just small actionable steps so that we can get closer. And then that afterwards, it does put everything in perspective. If someone really wants to have a mental shift, and I highly recommend you guys doing this, there's obviously gratitude. I've spoken about gratitude, but it's obviously they've been talking about this for thousands of years. Like Marcus Aurelius has been talking about this for thousands of years, but there's always talk about write one thing we're grateful for every day, or three things. Like I have a mental reminder at 8 o'clock every morning. What is one thing I can be grateful for this morning? Mm-hmm. It has to be something that new, and I have to almost justify why. That way I'm putting it into reasoning. But cool challenge, if anyone's listening, write down 100 things you're grateful for. Because after number 40, also, even when I did it, I was like, I don't know what else I can be grateful for, but it made me appreciate the little things. Like I'm grateful that I can see every color. I'm grateful because some people are blind, and I'm grateful for that I can walk happy and healthily today, even that I'm going through injury. That's actually something I'm struggling with right now, and it does play in my mental health. So the fact that I can walk and actually see a physio, I'm very grateful for, because one of the events I did was run 100 kilometers with a guy that has no arms. And the poor bastard can't do 99% of the things that we all can't do. Mm-hmm. So that puts everything into perspective, and it makes me focus on what I have, not what I'm missing. That one is the big one, being grateful. And also the things that we can do to ourselves. It's like eating the right things. I stress eat. So if I'm struggling, I used to rely on drugs and alcohol, but if I'm struggling now, I'm able to push past that barrier. I rely on sugar, and I'll own that. So when I can eat healthy, I feel better. And when it's just basic like physiological things. That's always a big one because it all starts with ourselves and also what we put in ourselves. I will get off. I'll do like a social media detox if I have to, because sometimes the news and the media portrays the bad things because we're wired for bad news because we're survival creatures, things like that. And also the big one that I should advocate more of is actually having, for men, is doing the men's circles and women doing the women's circles, or the circles that we can be in where we can be in a safe space. Obviously, whatever's said is kept in there as confidential, to help us process what's going on. Because some of the things that were going on is going back from our deep-rooted triggers when we're children, literally. So being in those environments where we can obviously help us go through, but it helps us process the emotions that we're going through so that they don't come out on our loved ones. So when we allow to ourselves to be vulnerable, we don't take it out on anyone else. And not obviously taking it, and that also means to be kind to ourselves as well. So I can go down an absolute rabbit hole with this stuff, but
I love everything you're saying, though. It's so true. It's so important to be grateful for even little things. And always finding the silver lining. I really like that. I like everything that you're saying. I think it's very important for people to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, we're always going through things, and I'm a firm believer that it's the decisions that we make, not the situation, that helps to have the positive or not so positive outcome. I mean, it's what you turn to. So some people, and I've been guilty of that too. Turn to things that aren't very constructive, but we use, whether it's alcohol or whatever, to get us through, and it's not really the best decision. So I mean, like you're saying with stress eating, I do the same thing. I mean, I stress eat. My wife even tell me, like, stop. Like, what are you doing? I'll come home from work and just start eating everything that I see, and it's like just trying to break that chain, and and make a better decision.
Yeah.
So, well, look, man, I know we're very respectful for your time. I know that you've got to run, but we really we're following you now, so we can't wait to see what you're doing, and you're doing such great things. And I just encourage everybody, you follow Toph, and we found you, man, on LinkedIn, and you've got a bunch of followers, and you have actually popped up a couple times on some of the most influential LinkedIn people to follow. And so you are inspirational. You're helping so many people, and we're so glad you're doing well. And we just thank you again for your time, and we're going to stay in touch.
I appreciate it. Thank you both. It's always a pleasure to be on a platform where I can just be myself as well. So thank you for like allowing me to do so, where I don't have to put on a mask. I can take all the things off, and so everyone can hear and sound and know that I'm a human being. And for everyone else to like understand that they're worthy of whatever they're going through, even the dark days, because that's where the greatness comes from as well. It's also understanding that we're not alone. So that's also part reason why I'm happy to lay my heart out. Someone might not agree with this, and that's fine. But there are always someone that may be going through something similar. So yeah.
Definitely. And guys, thanks for watching. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so now. Hit that little bell. Toph would love for you to do the same for him. We're going to publish all of his stuff. I mean, obviously we're live right now, but we are going to publish all of his information, contact information, and feel free to reach out and show your love and support for what he's doing. And, really not just Australia, but all over the world. So, thank you so much again, and have a great night.
Thank you, Toph.
Great morning, I should say.
Thank you both. Thank you so much.
Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.